At the beginning of the movie, Farah asks her teacher Harum why a rebellious woman is called an Ali of Hell. The teacher explains that in Arabic, Ali has different meanings, and in this context, it means dweller. Farah then asks, doesn't Ali also mean someone great? To which the teacher responds by asking if she wants to be someone great. Farah replies yes, but she doesn't want to be a dweller of hell, and she wants to be strong enough to endure the hell on earth so she can reunite with her parents in heaven. Farah suddenly wakes up from a nightmare and realizes it wasn't real. A video on her phone playing, saying the prophet said he saw most of the inhabitants of hell were women because they are ungrateful to their husbands and ungrateful for good treatment. Just then, her friend Dina arrives and reminds her that she has warned her before about listening to such strange things, saying that's why she keeps having nightmares. Later, a politician named Wahab visits their school and tells Ustad Irfan that, in addition to the funding he mentioned for the boarding school, he is also looking for a spouse. Farah speaks with her teacher, Harum, and asks if she would support her decision to get married. Harum asks if she's sure she doesn't want to pursue college first, to which Farah responds that she can attend college after getting married and asks Harum to recommend her, explaining that she wants to be a good, pious wife so she can go to heaven. Next, we see that Wahab and Farah are married, and during a speech, he introduces Farah to his supporters, adding that he believes every great man has a strong woman supporting him. However, Farah hears someone whispering her name. Confused, she looks around and, to her horror, spots a demonic woman sitting among Wahab's supporters. Just then, a woman's nose starts bleeding, and she screams in shock. Wahab and others rush to help her, trying to calm her down. And meanwhile, Farah notices that the demonic woman has vanished. As she steps forward to look around, it suddenly appears right in front of her, startling her. Wahab rushes to her side and asks what's wrong, but Farah dismisses it, saying she's fine. On their way home, Farah notices a rally for Wahab's opponent, Agung. Wahab explains that Agung and his family are locals, and he has served as district head multiple times. Farah then asks about Setio, to which Wahab replies that Setio is just a candidate for show, a choice for those tired of Agung. Farah then asks, is it possible that one of the candidates might have resorted to something unholy? Wahab asks what she means, but she quickly dismisses it and instead says, God willing, you will win this time. Later, while cooking, Farah feels Wahab hugging her from behind, but when she turns around, she is shocked to find no one there. Confused, she pauses the video playing on her phone, and just then, the maid enters and asks if she would like a fresh glass of milk, to which Farah firmly declines. Farah resumes cooking, and when the maid offers to help, Farah declines again, prompting the maid to leave the kitchen. Sometime later, Wahab hugs Farah again, but this time, it's really him. Next, we see Wahab trimming Farah's nails, and she asks how old he was in the photo, to which he replies that it was taken over 20 years ago, adding that the house in the picture is no longer his. As he continues, he accidentally cuts her finger and quickly apologizes, to which Farah assures him it's okay, and then shares an idea for his program. What if they provide some education for the girls in boarding schools? Wahab suggests that she teach them how to cook, adding that cooking for their husbands is one way women can enter heaven. He then gets up and leaves, but Farah suddenly feels something strange, and as she looks around, the entity that had been standing behind her vanishes. Meanwhile, the maid enters the cowshed and performs a ritual using Farah's nails, causing the cows to become restless, and one cow's eyes turn blood red. Later, as Farah performs her prayers, someone whispers her name, and before she can process it, there's a sudden knock at the door. Perplexed, Farah steps out to check, but finds no one at the door. Suddenly, the lights in the house begin to flicker, startling her, and eerie sounds start coming from the radio. Terrified, she cautiously approaches it as it begins playing a hadith, stating that every sin has its consequences. The radio then suddenly shuts off on its own, and just then, there is another knock at the door. Farah walks toward the door, but suddenly slips and falls, and to her horror, she sees pieces of flesh scattered across the floor. Just then, she notices someone crouching under the table, and looking closer, She is terrified to see the entity devouring raw animal flesh. Farah screams in fear, only to wake up abruptly. Later, Farah and Wahab visit the boarding school, where Haroum and Farah's friends are delighted to see her. Next, Irfan shares a hadith about the women of hell, stating the Prophet saw most hell dwellers were women. He lists their signs: disobedience to husbands, those who overly adorn themselves, going out without their husband's permission, exposing their husband's faults, and wearing revealing clothes. As Irfan continues speaking, Farah suddenly feels uneasy, hearing a disturbing noise, and she spots the entity sitting among them. Terrified, she silently seeks forgiveness from God, and when she looks back, the entity has vanished. But just then she spots it again, outside the classroom. Farah follows the entity to the washroom and sees its feet beneath the stall door. Gathering her courage, she swings the door open, only to find it empty. Confused, she dismisses it and washes her face, trying to calm herself, but only then she hears the entity laughing, and looking up, she is horrified to see the entity's reflection staring back at her from the mirror. At that moment, Dana enters and rushes to her, but the entity has vanished. Dina brings Farah outside, but Farah is shocked to see a goon. However, when she gets up to get a better look, he suddenly vanishes. At that moment, Wahab's nose starts bleeding, and just then, Wahab's hoardings begin falling one by one, leaving everyone stunned. Worried, Farah tells Wahab that she feels like someone is trying to mess with them. He asks if it's because of what happened earlier, to which she replies that it's not just that. She then shares she has been seeing a strange woman for the past few days, and she suspects that his rivals might be trying to sabotage him. Wahab gently embraces her, offering reassurance, but as he turns to leave, he stops hearing a noise. Farah tenses up, but Wahab instructs the maid to lock all the doors and get everything ready. Wahab brings Farah to their room and asks if she wants to help him, to which she asks what she can do for him. The maid enters with a glass of milk, and Wahab hands it to Farah. As she takes a sip, a strange sound echoes again, like footsteps on the roof, and suddenly, the lights go out. Wahab leans in close and whispers that he wants her to wait for him there. He then leaves the room with the maid, locking the door behind them. Alone and terrified, Farah starts chanting God's name, but only then does she hear some demonic chantings. Perplexed, Farah gets up and cautiously walks toward the window, and as she pulls back the curtain, a group of people is standing eerily still. Before she can process what she's seeing, the wardrobe door creaks open on its own. Her heart pounds as she steps closer to take a better look, and suddenly, the entity emerges, slowly walking toward her. It stops right in front of her, smiling unsettlingly, and the door to her room opens, and the entity vanishes. Terrified, Farah steps out of the room, only to find Wahab engaged in some kind of ritual, and in front of him lies a goon's photo. Panicking, she tries to wake him, but the entity moves closer and grips her body, completely possessing her. Meanwhile, as Dina is distributing food, she notices Farah walking in a trance-like state. Perplexed, Diana follows her, but Farah ignores her and keeps walking, and Diana watches as Farah enters a goon's house. Farah's eyes snap open, watching her own hands move against her will, tying knots, wrapping a shroud over a goon's lifeless body. A goon slowly begins to sit up, and a blood-curdling scream rips from her throat, but she suddenly jolts awake. When she comes outside, a group of people arrives at their house and informs Wahab that a goon passed away early this morning. Wahab and Farah visit a goon's house for his funeral, and while there, Farah picks up a religious book, only to be shocked when she discovers that all its pages are blank. The entity says you killed him, and Haroum notices Farah's uneasiness. Desperate to distract herself, Farah picks up another book and begins reading, but to her horror, the words on the pages slowly start to vanish. Suddenly, a goon says you killed me, and Farah screams in terror, insisting that she didn't do it. Wahab brings Farah outside and forces her into the car, and when Haroum tries to talk to her, Wahab tells her she's just exhausted from the many incidents related to the campaign. Irfan asks what incidents he's referring to, but Wahab simply replies that he needs to take his wife home. On their way home, Farah tries to talk to Wahab, but he cuts her off, warning her not to defy him, asking if she wants to go to hell for doing so. Meanwhile, Harum and Irfan are worried about Farah. Harum suggests they check on her, believing she is silently asking for help and that letting her go home with Wahab might be a mistake. Irfan, though understanding her concern, insists that they shouldn't interfere in other people's family matters. Later, Diana visits Farah's house to deliver the food Harum prepared for her. Wahab inspects the bag, and when Diana asks if she can check on Farah, he coldly responds that she is resting before shutting the door in her face. The next day, Farah hears a noise from the fridge and opens it to find a cloth inside. Perplexed, she pulls it out, only to realize it's a muddy shroud. Frightened, she slams the door, only to see Agung's ghost, causing her to scream in fear. The maid rushes to her, and Farah looks around, only to find that the ghost has vanished. The maid helps Farah sit on a chair. However, she suddenly plucks her hair and quickly apologizes, and nervously says she will be out back before hurrying away. Farah watches from inside as the maid meets Wahab and shows him the strand of hair she had just plucked from her. Wahab examines it briefly before handing it back to the maid and walking away. Next, the maid is seen performing a ritual, offering Farah's hair to the demon, and moments later, a demonic hand reaches toward the offering. After some time, Farah watches in horror as the maid continues the ritual, and before she can grasp what is happening, the maid suddenly looks in her direction, forcing Farah to quickly hide. When she cautiously peeks again, the maid is nowhere to be seen. Panicked, she takes out her phone and begins recording the scene, but the entity suddenly appears on the screen. Farah rushes back to her house and quickly sends the recordings to Diana, but just then, Wahab enters the room and snatches her phone from her. Farah tries to explain what she saw, but he silently deletes the videos she sent. Then, he throws her phone on the floor and angrily reminds her, "Didn't I warn you never to go there?" He then picks up her broken phone and walks out of the room without further saying anything. Meanwhile, Diana receives a notification on her phone and sees the videos Farah sent. However, just as she tries to open them, they get deleted. Suddenly, her phone rings, and she quickly answers, but there is only silence on the other end. Her phone rings again, and it's a video call from Farah. Confused, she picks up, only to see a rocking chair on the screen. Then, the entity says, "Leave me alone," startling Diana. Meanwhile, Wahab drugs Farah into a half-conscious state, and as she weakly trembles, he coldly takes a blade and slices some pieces of skin from her back, causing her to sob in pain, too weak to resist. Next, Wahab is seen performing a ritual, offering Farah's skin as a sacrifice, and the entity is also present there. The next day, the maid applies a paste to Farah's wounds, while Farah says, "I got married to get closer to heaven, but why does it feel like I'm in hell?" She then asks, "Who exactly is the man I'm married to?" But the maid remains silent. Later, when Farah and Wahab arrive at a rally, the guards block Diana and Harum from reaching her. Farah also ignores them as she walks ahead, and Wahab then holds Farah's hand and steps forward. But suddenly, he lets go, leaving her behind, surrounded by countless ghosts, with the demonic woman standing among them, staring directly at her. The woman tells Farah to enjoy her heaven, causing her to step back in fear before collapsing and screaming. Dina and Harum try to calm her down, while Irfan urges her to remember God. Wahab says he must take his wife home. However, Irfan tells him to bring Farah to the boarding school, and declares that she must be exorcised immediately. At the school, Irfan instructs Wahab to place Farah on the table. Wahab complies and lays her down, but he whispers something in her ear. Farah begins to murmur that she has to be an obedient wife to go to heaven, and then she apologizes to Harum. As Irfan begins to recite prayers, Farah's eyes start to roll back. Moments later, her body stiffens, her eyes turn red, and she begins to levitate in the air. She then lets out an eerie laugh before suddenly jumping and collapsing onto the table. Dana and Harum rush to help Farah up, while Wahab continues chanting something. As they help her sit, they notice blood on her back. They urge Farah to remember God, but the entity appears and approaches Farah, telling her that only you can see me because I was sent by him to deceive you. Farah collapses, only to suddenly sit up again, and then she jumps and perches on the table. Irfan continues reciting prayers, and Wahab tells him that something is not right as it smells rotten. The entity tells Irfan it's useless, as Farah has chosen to dwell in hell, and then she hurls Wahab and Diana away. She then leaps onto Irfan, clinging to him before throwing him away. Irfan gets up, calling upon God, and as she lunges at him again, he stops her midair by reciting prayers, and after a tense moment, he manages to throw her to the floor. They rush to check on Farah, and Dina pleads with Wahab to let her stay for the night, but Wahab refuses, saying Ustad Irfan has done all he could, and now it is his turn to take her home. However, as Wahab picks Farah up to leave, Haroum slips something into her pocket. Wahab slaps Farah, saying, "Look what she has done," he says. "Don't think they can mess up his plans." And then, grabbing her face, he reminds her that he is her imam, but Farah tells him that he is not the kind of imam anyone should admire. Enraged, Wahab punches her, and then he seizes her by the throat and asks how she dares to defy her husband. He tells her that women who disobey their husbands burn in hellfire and asks if she isn't afraid of hell. Farah says she's already in hell and that he's not the kind of husband who can lead her to heaven. Furious, Wahab strikes her again, but undaunted, she tells him he is not a man worthy of anyone's respect. Blinded by rage, Wahab pulls off his belt and begins beating her, and even the maid, watching in silence, trembles in fear. She calls Ustad and is about to reveal the truth, but Wahab disconnects the phone's wire and orders her to get Farah ready tonight as there is no time left. Meanwhile, Diana rushes to a room, saying Farah recited Surah at-Tahrim, verse 11, making her wonder what if Farah has been trapped with a man like Pharaoh all along. She asks Irfan, what if Wahab has been mistreating her, and insists they must help before it's too late. As Ustad prepares to leave to help Farah, a group of Wahab's men intercepts him, blocking his path. Meanwhile, the maid tries to help Farah escape, but Wahab's men catch them, and they seize the maid and drag her away. Wahab brings Farah into a room, and as she looks around, she realizes it's the same place where she had once seen the maid performing a ritual. She asks him if he made a deal with a jinn, to which he responds that the jinn helped him regain his power, and that they needed a woman like her for the sacrifice. Farah asks how he could sacrifice his own wife, to which he angrily tells her to shut up, saying he doesn't want to hear her voice. Helpless, Farah cries out to God for help, and it is then that she notices a note in her pocket that reads, "Read Al-Fajr, verses 27-30. As Wahab prepares her for the sacrifice, Farah begins reciting the verses, and meanwhile, Diana manages to enter Wahab's property. Farah falls unconscious, but after a while, she wakes up to some noise and sees that Diana has arrived, searching for her. Farah tells her she can't take it anymore, but Diana urges her not to say that and reassures her that she will get her out of there. Dina helps Farah to her feet, and they begin to leave, only to be stopped by Wahab, who shuts the door, trapping them inside. He warns Diana that he won't let her interfere with his plan before launching an attack on both of them. He then grabs Diana by the throat, pinning her against the wall, and when she tries to fight back, he overpowers her and strikes her, knocking her unconscious. He then forces Farah onto the table and slices her forehead with a knife. Taking strands of her hair and pieces of her skin, he places them on a cow skull. Then, he cuts his own arm and lets his blood drip onto the skull. After this, he sits down to worship the devil, chanting spells as a demonic entity approaches him. Wahab himself begins to transform into a demon, but just as the entity draws closer, Farah overturns the table, disrupting the ritual and leaving it incomplete. Shocked, he rushes to check the skull, and upon finding it destroyed, he becomes furious and hurls it to the floor. He then turns to Farah in anger, but she frantically throws objects at him to keep him at bay. Wahab declares that she belongs to him, but she fights back, slashing him with a broken piece of a plate. Enraged, Wahab lunges at her, striking her repeatedly until she collapses to her knees. He then grabs Farah by her hair, forcing her to stand. But before he can kill her, Dana intervenes, stopping him. Wahab releases Farah and, in a fit of fury, stabs Diana. Seeing this, Farah grabs a horn and drives it straight into Wahab's heart, killing him instantly. The scene from the movie's beginning, which Farah saw in her nightmare, plays once again. And as she walks away from the house, the screen fades to black. Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the chills, hit that like button, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss a scare. Until next time, stay spooky.